Are YouTubers filmmakers?
I don't like the way filmmaker as a term is thrown around. Okay, you know what? We'll just hash it out.
Recently, a friend of mine who's a very well-known filmmaker made me feel like what I'm doing is not filmmaking.
No.
He brought up some very, very good points, some very compelling points.
Really?
And what it basically boiled down to was that if, the whole, like, have you made a film, Gerald?
No.
If you were to make a film, like, there's a whole process involved. Write a script, you storyboard, you have to cast, you have to, like, location scout.
We're there.
Raise money, build the crew.
We have a new crew member today.
You get a cast.
Good.
Rehearsals. You're shooting the thing.
And action.
And then you're editing. It's a whole, like, process.
Yeah, like an ecosystem, like a whole different thing.
Yeah, dude, it's very, very, very different than even the most cinematic videos that I've shot. And that's what his point was. He's like, you make really cinematic videos, and they're movie-like, but those are not films. They have their own time and place, and it's like this new age type of media thing. But the whole filmmaking process, there's just so much that goes into it that I think your generation is just kind of covering over.
All right, I have some thoughts, and I want you to sort of tackle these.
Okay.
I'll say these are counterpoints. To be fair, I'm in agreement. I think that we use the word filmmaking on YouTube very liberally. And I never use it to apply to myself because I'm not a filmmaker in any capacity, right?
Ever since he told me that, now all I think is like filmmaker is just a term that we use to sell things.
Would you like to buy a monkey?
Like we are not gold miners. We're the guys selling the shovels. You know
sure,
what I mean?
but there's always been that, like even cinematic, eventually you have to just sort of accept something that people use the word cinematic to mean more than it means. And the same argument, I think, of people say, literally, you mean figuratively. Literally doesn't mean that. Actually, literally has been misused so many times.
You hijacked the word literally from us.
That if you look up the definition, literally can also sort of mean it
figuratively.
Words evolve. And I feel like cinematic has evolved from meaning like applied to cinema to meaning something else. And I'm okay with words evolving. That's my first caveat. My second one is, again, I agree that filmmaking is, probably used a bit too liberally on YouTube, and that there's differences within YouTube itself. Like what you do, you make things that are definitely more like films than what I make. So even between us, even if we're both in some filmmaking genre,
right,
we're on different ends of that as well. The racket and Batman facing you.
Okay.
When it comes to filmmaking as the actual thing, not YouTube, so you're out there and you're doing it. I also feel that there's a spectrum that maybe is fair to call so what if you're just somebody with a camera on your shoulder and you're filming docs?
Dogs.
Docs.
What?
Docs.
Yeah, dogs.
Docs.
Oh, dogs.
Is that filmmaking? Maybe you don't have a crew or a storyboard or any of that kind of stuff. But here's where I think it gets a little bit tricky is I think there's also a spectrum within proper filmmaking. And I mean, not YouTube, so remove from YouTube. But what about if somebody was just filming a documentary and they were just rocking a camera on their shoulder and it was just them and they didn't really storyboard it and they're just in there watching things develop and later on maybe it gets made in the cutting room floor. A lot of those prerequisites don't exist.
Although good documentaries, they do storyboard stuff out. There's a lot of pre-planning in it. It may feel like it's raw, but like, the volcano is blowing up right now. So they send a crew out there and then they find some family that's really, really interesting to film. And then the husband has this really fascinating job.
I'm an architect.
And so they keep filming him. And then they're like, oh, let's set it up. Like, let's take him out by the volcano so we get some footage of him. They're doing it. It's just not written out.
I agree.
What I mean?
And for some things, like big interviews, they'll have a crew, like, fully functional.
Right.
I just mean, I think there's a range. So is there some sort of line where you draw the line?
Ken Burns, Werner Herzog, those are films.
Story is there to
teach them, for example, how to pick locks.
But like, is a vlog, like you have to draw the line somewhere. Me vlogging at going to the grocery store, sure, it's documentary stuff, right? It's real life stuff, but like that's not film. Like,
So if you were to make the rules, if you were some kind of just, you get to sign the rules of what filmmaking is, what's the minimum requirements for you to get the title?
I think the minimum requirement is tension. It must satisfy, it must create and alleviate tension.
Do you need a certain amount of crew, a certain amount of...
No, I don't...
I mean, obviously,
that's a good question.
It's all theoretical, and really, we're just being pedantic about a word.
He can be pedantic.
But I do think it's interesting because there is criticism attached to it, which is like, that's not filmmaking,
Well, like, there's a lot of legit filmmaker friends of mine that I have to concede my experience of doing that is far different than their experience. Like, they have a whole other skill set that I don't have.
Nunchuck skills, bow hunting skills.
Pulling permits for, like, really expensive places, writing a budget.
Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills.
That's part of the experience. Like, I have no idea how to do that.
But I thought when we were talking about filmmaking, it was more about logistics of, like, have you qualified tackling enough obstacles?
I mean, there are many different types of films, but a wedding video is...
That's a
somebody's
great example.
special day.
Is that, they call them wedding films.
Has a wedding film ever been aired at like Cannes or something like that?
Yeah,
like,
I mean maybe, but
I mean, it probably actually, it probably has. I'll have to look that up. That hasn't really happened yet. That's not mainstream yet. Is my friend Scorsese, and we're talking about Marvel films, like that's not cinema.
That's the other side of it, where again, are you just being pedantic?
Pedantic.
On my YouTube channel, something I like to say whenever I get those same types of criticisms of like, what gives you the right to talk about these things? You haven't shot any movies or whatever. And I usually say, well, that's true, I haven't, but I'm not talking about that. I don't make videos on like,
how to crew up your production.
Or like,
what to do in your first casting.
Or like, I don't make videos about that because I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I also don't make like
I just look, guys, I just sell you the shovels. Exactly. I don't actually like go gold mining.
I feel like I do,
like, I just know what shovel is the best.
Yeah.
Shovels.
I
get all the shovels together, and I make sure that what the manufacturer is saying about the shovel is true or not. And I let you know they're lying about the shovel. The shovel's smaller than they said it was, and it breaks apart. What you do with the shovel, that's your own business, okay? It's not mine. It's important, I guess, to speak within the things that you feel comfortable talking about. And I do feel like there is this need of people when you talk about certain things that they want to see some kind of art work that goes along with that. And I can kind of understand it. I've always battled with this where, and you and I talk about this all the time, of like, I'm doing the technical and you're doing the practical. But it's like, I feel like this is a little bit representative of the entire problem. If you post a photo and you say something like, happy with this photo I took out at the mountains, I don't know, whatever, right? You'll often get comments that are like, what was the shutter speed? Or
tell me your f-stop.
And I feel like that's sort of the equivalent of showing work, but in reverse. And my question comes, what does it matter? Do you know what I mean? Like, you knowing the shutter speed or you knowing the f-stop there doesn't mean anything relative to you being able to reproduce it in the same way that me telling you how a camera works and then showing you what...
You and I have vastly different crowds.
I think that the point I'm trying to make is that me showing you a piece of work and then you asking how it's made has a disconnect to it. In the same way that me showing you how a camera works and then you asking me to shoot art with it, there's also a disconnect. Because if I'm really, really good at making a lousy camera look good, that's not useful information. And if I take a really good camera and make it look terrible, that's not useful information either. So it's the same way as like...
It's when you take a really cheap camera and you make it look amazing.
Yeah, then you want a tutorial on how you did that because that's useful information.
Yeah, that'll always do well.
But so I find that there's a disconnect there, and I feel like it might be rooted similarly in the idea of filmmaking channel. Well, what films have you made? I agree the terminology might be misleading there, and instead it should be, lighting review channel or something because that's more specific. But I also think that that we shouldn't be so connected to the idea of like without having shot films that you don't have an opinion, because your work that you put on your channel, Anamorphia or whatever, shows that you have skills that are useful or that you've overcome some kind of challenges, that you've learned some things, and then you can pass that information on for free, by the way, on the internet. It's either useful to you or it's not. And the proof is in the pudding of like, this is what I made with it, and this is you know, this is, I feel like that's valuable even if you're not making a proper film. You know, I don't know. In your case, because you call Anamorphia a film.
Well, it's just Anamorphia 2 I call a film. There's a major product endorsement in there. So I'd say 90% of my filmmaker friends would be like, that's a 30-minute advertisement, you know?
But you know what? So are all the movies and shows that you watch too. Like, why is the guy drinking Coke? I think there's always an air of elitism in any field where if you've gone through, you know, even if you were like an electrician and you had a really tough apprenticeship and then, you know, you learned some skills by getting your butt kicked in the trenches or whatever, become an electrician, and then some new guy shows up and he got his electrician, you know, ticket easier. There's going to be this like elitism of, well, you're not a real electrician because you don't know this or that. There's always that kind of sense, I think, in any profession.
You're gonna make it all 220? Yeah, 220, 221, whatever it takes.
I agree, but I don't know what the term would be other than that. Like, if we're not
That's
filmmakers, what do we call ourselves then? Video makers? You know?
But and then
it just sounds so.
It does.
It sounds so stupid.
What's the definition of video then in that context? Because film was a medium,
right?
So why is it a film? It's more like, wouldn't it be a reel or like a spool?
Memory card maker.
That's ridiculous. I know we're getting kind of abstract, but I think maybe a term that is probably apt, but a lot of people hate it, is content creator. But the idea of certain ways that you say that makes my skin crawl, like a piece of content.
Yeah.
Ugh. Anamorphia 2, a piece of content from Josh O, whatever. Like, it just sounds so like gross. Yeah. Probably the most apt term where it's like, yeah, it's fair. It was content to be consumed on the internet. It was a piece of content. It just sounds gross.
Someone like Tarantino, like that dude's a legit filmmaker. Like he shoots on film.
Film. On film. And that's film running through a camera.
He shoots for it to be ingested into a movie theater.
Yep.
He's not filming his movies so that you can watch it on your iPhone. I don't know. I don't shoot my stuff to be ingested in the movie theaters.
Yeah.
If that was the case, I would never have a close-up. Like, I have a lot of close-ups.
And its bigness in those big close-ups.
But in movie theater, it's going to be stretched out like 30 feet. You know, it would be like massive. Like my eyeball alone would be 10 feet tall.
I like how Tarantino says he makes movies. I think that's a fine term.
Right.
But if it's for YouTube, yeah, like is YouTube video? The problem is that is too broad too. Because YouTube video could be anything from like a 10-second video of like a rat to, you know, a 30-minute film.
Good job.
I would argue tension. If it has tension in there, it's a movie. If you think about it, where do movies probably come from? Myths. Myth. The oldest stories are myths, but where do those come from? They come from dreams. Like our first storytelling experience is a dream. Some weird thing happening, some fantasy world happening, right? Something either being taken away or given, new ground beneath us, and then you wake up and you're like changed by it. And what is that? Like, well, you went through tension. You went through like some really tense scenario and then there was the release. I would think that movies have to have some form of tension. If you want to separate yourself as a content maker to a filmmaker,
start releasing dreams. Anamorphia 2, A Dream by Makeartnow.
So I could have ended it there, and Gerald told me to end it there, but I'm not going to end it there. Number one, I've seen some incredible work on YouTube. I think the next generation of filmmakers are on this channel right now. They are flexing, they are practicing, they are honing their skills. It's very, very exciting because we don't have the same constraints that normal filmmakers do. It's very experimental, and this is where we are honing our craft. So kudos to us filmmakers out there that are just grinding away. Keep going, keep telling stories, keep doing it. We are on the right track. It's worth it in the end. And number two, my friend who doesn't think I'm a filmmaker, guys like that, I've never listened to them. In fact, whenever they tell me stuff like that, it just encourages me to work even harder, to prove them wrong, to eat their lunch in front of them and take their job. So we'll see what happens. I'll see you guys on Thursday.